you haven't got one of the aids in the back, you can get one. They're back there, and we're welcome to grab one. That's what we'll be going off of tonight. No PowerPoint or anything, so if you'd like to look at that. And the question for the pre-study, it says, how do you define innocence? What part does innocence play in a Christian's life? It's an interesting word. It's one of those words like wisdom that we kind of confuse with knowledge a lot of times. So how do you define innocence, and what part does innocence play in your Christian life? Today, people often ask, what is wrong with the world today? And you see it all the time with the mass shootings becoming the norm all around us, to even more violence filling our movies, TVs, smartphone screens, to hate-fueled arguments over everything from the President of the United States, which is seemingly important to people, to the uber weird. One of the weirdest arguments I could find on the internet when I was looking at this was 2 Thomas the Tank Engine reaction shot Twitter handles having an all-out fight over who is plagiarizing who. So if you're not familiar with Twitter, that's how this goes. Literally, there are 2 different accounts, one named @Thomas_reacts. I'm not making this up, this is weird, this is real. And the other named @ThomasReacts_, who just react to things on the internet with screenshots from a children's show called Thomas and Friends. And they got into a fight on the internet because you're plagiarizing my jokes. No, you're plagiarizing mine. Pretty sad. But if you look at the world, you see why people are asking this. It's easy to see how one could look at the world and think, remember how it used to be simpler? I mean, I grew up in the 80s, kind of. I was a 80s baby in the 90s. And it seemed like, before the internet, it was simpler. Maybe they were just glorifying the past, Sometimes I think that, it wasn't always like that, or, am I just glorifying the past? Wasn't it much more innocent back then? It seemed slower time, Maybe I was just young and didn't realize, so I kind of wanted to research this a lot. So what happened to our simple lives? What happened to innocence? Is it really dying, or is it something that, just glamorizing the past? Well, from our research, to put it bluntly, we are the ones killing innocence, and it is dying, and we are the ones to blame. And in the process, we're destroying our once simple and happy lives. Innocence means so much more to a person and to a Christian than we realize or we give it credit for. When most people hear innocence, they think of children and therefore associate it as a childish characteristic, something we grow out of. Oh, you grow out of that innocent state and you'll realize how the world really works. You look at innocence as naive or gullible. Oh, they're so innocent, they don't understand the world. Someday, after they get hardened a little bit to this, they'll understand it. I'm sure you've heard that. I've heard it. I remember when I moved to New York. Oh, you'll understand New York eventually. Oh, you poor, innocent, naive, little West Virginia boy. You'll understand how it all works eventually. What if I told you that all these views of innocence are very far from the truth? And that we have been thinking about innocence all wrong for many, many years. Today we'll be looking at what innocence really is and the role it should play in a Christian's life. So we had to introduce ourselves to innocence, because kind of just get your preconceived notions of innocence out of your mind. So I put, this is the title of this section. Innocence, this is a Christian. Christian, this is innocence. I'm introducing you to innocence. What is innocence? Let's look at Matthew 10 and 16. It says there, Matthew 10, 16, "Behold, I send you out as sheep in the midst of wolves. So be shrewd as serpent and innocent as doves." We are to be as shrewd as serpents, so we should have some wisdom about us, but we are also to be innocent. Let's look at also Romans 16:19. We'll go over that too. "For the report of your obedience has reached to all. Therefore I am rejoicing over you. But I want you to be wise in what is good and innocent in what is evil." See several times there, to avoid evil, to be innocent. And one more, 1 Thessalonians 5:23. "Now may the God of peace himself sanctify you entirely, and may your spirit and soul and body be preserved completely," pay attention to this, "without blame at the coming of the Lord Jesus Christ." Innocence, very simply, is untainted purity of heart. I love that definition. Untainted purity of heart. Unimpaired integrity. Romans 12:2 says, "And do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, so that you may prove what the will of God is, that which is good, acceptable, and perfect." Innocence, a couple things about innocence. It attracts innocence. Think about Jesus, the most innocent person that ever lived on this earth. Lived to be in his 30s, was a full-grown man, and was the most innocent person you would ever meet in your life. The cool thing about innocence is that it attracts innocence. You look at Jesus, what did he love to be around? He loved to be around children. But why did he love to be around children? I've heard people in this congregation, "Oh, those babies are so loud. Oh, this and that." We hear children, "Oh, yeah, I like children." Right? We think that. And then you're around children for a little bit and you're like, "Oh, children are kind of annoying sometimes," right? They're a lot to handle. But Jesus loved to be around children. The more, the merrier. He was not annoyed by them. He did not look to them as a burden. He liked to be around them. Why? Let's look at Matthew 18:1-5. At the time, the disciples came to Jesus and said, "Who then is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven?" And he called a child to himself and set him before them and said, "Truly I say to you, unless you are converted and become like children, you will not enter the kingdom of heaven. Whoever then humbles himself as this child, he is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. And whoever receives one such child is my name receives me." We look at the past as the past, and we look at our childish ways as I have grown up and I have grown out of my childish ways. And some things that is good. But there are a lot of things we can learn from our former self and from children in themselves. Jesus was never above a child. This was very rare for a full-grown adult to bring a child over and say, "Hey, you need to be like this child. You need to be innocent. You need to be pure." Jesus told us we have to become like innocent children. Do you really think being as innocent is something we shouldn't be doing? Something we should grow out of? Zacchaeus, remember him? The short little guy? He was a tax collector, and everybody thought, "Oh, he's a tax collector. He's an evil, bad man." Yet Jesus saw him in that sycamore tree, picked him out of this crowd, and immediately called him by name. Jesus had the ability to perceive what? His innocence, perhaps? He led this man to a new life, you see in Luke 19:1-10. He publicly offered to give half of his goods to the poor and to restore 4 times whatever he'd collected unjustly. Innocence is not always perfect. I'm sure Zacchaeus was not perfect. But what did Jesus say about that child? Humble yourself. You're humble enough to realize that you make mistakes, that you're not always the best, that you're a part of a bigger thing. Another time that innocence attracts innocence is, I thought this is interesting. This is a whole other study itself, so I'm not going to go too far into it. Boy, it is an interesting study. It's no secret that Jesus loved the wilderness. He always would retreat into the wilderness. You see that in Luke 5:16 says, "But Jesus himself would often slip away into the wilderness and pray." We see that tons of times. He would retreat and get away from everybody. He said he'd go into the lonely places in some versions by himself. Why would he do that? One, he was around God's creation. He would go there to pray, so he was around all of God's creation. But why else would he choose to go there? What else is in creation? If you go out into the wilderness, what are you sure to see out there? It's not that hard to figure out. There are tons of animals out there. There's nothing more innocent than an animal. I look at my little dog is about this big, and it's the most innocent thing you ever see in your life. And I've heard people go, "Oh, it's just a dog. It's just a dumb dog," things like that. Or it's just a dumb animal. I hate to tell you, but when you really study what animals are in Scripture, they are way more important and way more integral to what we think than our Christianity than what we think. Do you know that animals talk to God? We see that several times with Elijah. The ravens came and fed them. Who told them that? God. What about Noah's Ark? God sent the animals to Noah's Ark. Noah didn't go around and say, hey, animals, come on out. It was God who did that. I told my mom one day, I was laughing, I said, it's funny. You ever have an animal just kind of stares into a space and just starts barking? You're like, there's nothing there. What are you barking at? And I started thinking one day, I'm like, okay, she is certain there is something there. Get on their level. Oh, I'm not going to lower myself to be like, get on their level. She sees something. What is that? Do you ever think that animals can see something you don't see? Oh, how can that be? I'm a human. What about, Mom said, I swear I think she sees like an angel or something. Like what if they can? What if animals can see angels? And she said, what about Balaam's donkey? And I was like, whoa, blew my mind away a little bit. He saw the angel, did he not? The donkey saw it. He stopped, and the man did not see it. Until the donkey had to talk and say, hey, dummy, you're going to get killed if you go forward. I'm going to save your life, man. We think so small-mindedly on things. But look at Job 12, 7 through 10. But now ask the beast and let them teach you, and the birds of the heavens and let them tell you. I love this passage. Or speak to the earth and let it teach you, and let the fish of the sea declare to you. Who among all these does not know that the hand of the Lord has done this, in whose hand is the life of every living thing and the breath of all mankind? Go out in nature. You will see a more innocent part of you come out. Caleb and Amber just went on a hike yesterday. I'm sure if you talk to them about their hike, when you come out, you feel rejuvenated and refreshed. You see little things, and you say, how can this be? How could this happen? There's only one answer, and that is an almighty and all-loving God. Your innocence is restored. I always thought about that as a child. Remember, we used to love to climb trees and play and all that stuff, and somewhere along the line, and it's different for everybody, we lose that childish way. We lose that ability to play. So sad. I remember losing my imagination, and one day I thought about that, and I was in college, and I was just so depressed about losing my imagination. I was like, because I was in theater. I was acting all the time, but I felt like I had no imagination. And I was like, is this it? Do I lose it forever? And so I made it a concerted effort to try to get my imagination back, to try to play. When the kids come up, or my dog, or anything like, and you want to play, you try to interact with these kids and get on their level and see from their eyes. Be innocent like Christ wanted us to be. One of the reasons I think we get away from all this innocence as we get older is that innocence makes people uncomfortable. I remember being in college, and I was in a fraternity, and it's happened many times since then. I've never drank a drop of alcohol in my life. I'm not saying that to pat me on the back by any means. I don't care for that at all. What I'm saying is I just never have done it. But ever since I was very young, about every time I get around anybody who's drinking at all, they know I don't drink, they say, I wish I could just get you drunk one time. Why? I wish I could hear you swear one time. You ever have that? Oh, if you don't cuss, I just want to hear you say the F word one time. If I could just get you mad enough. Why do they want you to do that? Because innocence makes people uncomfortable. They do not like to be around it. We have this picture of Mr. Rogers here. He was one of the most innocent people we've had in our lifetime, if not the most. You look at this guy, he was on television for 900 and some episodes or something ridiculous. A lot of episodes. There's not one really bad thing you could find about this guy, you think. You start digging deeper, and you realize there were protesters at his funeral, protesting this man's funeral. Not one person I really find says one thing bad about him, but there are protesters at his funeral. Towards the end of his life, he felt like he failed at what he was trying to accomplish. His wife over here says, because Fred's struggle was often against people who didn't take him seriously and understand the profundity of his message. Treating him like a saint keeps him two-dimensional. His mission was to tell us that we all struggle. And he doesn't exist on another plane. He labored incredibly hard to fight for grace. I'm not saying Fred Rogers is Jesus, but boy, this guy tried very hard to have some kind of grace and kindness. And if you've ever been out in the world for 5 minutes, you realize how hard it is to go day to day and show some kind of couth and kindness. Stand in line anywhere for about 5 minutes and see how hard it is to do that. But this man had nothing bad really said about him, but people still twist it and perverse it. They can't just see. I don't know why he's so innocent. How can he be so innocent? How could he have been so kind? There was something else to this. There's all kinds of urban legends about Mr. Rogers. None of them are true. He was a sniper in the Vietnam War. Oh, yeah, he was killing people in the Vietnam War. No, that's not true. He was a particularly violent Navy SEAL. That's why he was trying to that's why he did the kids shows, to make sure the people, his redemption. No, he wasn't. Oh, he was gay and he was bisexual. That's what the whole thing. That's why he's so kind. He was really trying to hit on these people. I even seen an article saying that after Mr. Rogers died, a whole book was written. He's a bisexual Twitter never knew they needed. That was what he was not. He was a married man. He had several kids. Straight as an arrow. He adopted his signature sweater to cover up his full sleeve tattoos. Yeah, Mr. Rogers, he had full tattoos. One for each of the kills he had. I heard that before. That's not true. No, he didn't. He flipped off a television camera. Oh, yeah, he was flipping it off. I have a picture of it. I'll show you a meme of it. He's flipping it off. And I can show it to you. But if you watch the whole thing, he's singing Little Thumbkin, a little song. Very innocently singing a song, not flipping off the camera. He created his show in order to abuse children. That's what it is. You can't be that nice and want to be around children as a full-grown man. He's an old man. He wanted kids to be around. He was abusing them. Nope. No record of that. None at all. People can be innocent. You can be innocent. I can be innocent. Again, like his wife said, he was not perfect. He did not want you to think he was perfect. He had to fight hard for grace, and we have to fight hard to keep our innocence alive. Another thing about innocence is that sin destroys innocence. Let's look at Titus 1:15. It says, "To the pure, all things are pure, but to those who are defiled and unbelieving, nothing is pure. But both their mind and their conscience are defiled." You see this in the world all the time. It's so easy to pick up your phone and before you go to bed and you look at Facebook, you look at Twitter, you look at Instagram, you can see horrible graphic stuff. Dogs and cats and animals being abused, kids being abused. We have videos of every single thing you ever want. Pornographic images come up there. Half-naked people all over the internet. Naked people all over it. On Facebook and everything else. It's become commonplace with us to just scroll, like, heart, swipe, unfollow. That's what we're becoming. Sin destroys innocence, though. Look no further than Adam and Eve, the very first sin. There are no two people that were more innocent than Adam and Eve. They were the first man and woman. And look how sin not only destroyed their innocence, but also made them feel shameful. Look at Genesis 3:7-11. "Then the eyes of both of them were opened, and they knew that they were naked. And they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves loin coverings. They heard the sound of the Lord walking in the garden in the cool of the day. And the man and his wife hid themselves from the presence of the Lord among the trees of the garden." They knew they did something wrong. "Then the Lord called to the man and said, 'Where are you?' He said, 'I heard the sound of you in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked, so I hid myself.' And he said, 'Who told you you were naked? Have you eaten from the tree which I commanded you not to eat?'" Sin destroyed their innocence. How do we think it happens with Adam and Eve? But for us, it's just on my phone. It's just on my computer. It's just on my TV. It's not real life. It's just on a screen. They're just actors portraying actors. It doesn't affect my life. We had a guy up at work the other day, and this is before the whole thing with Donald Trump and the other mass shootings, but he was a guy that was trained in mass shootings. There was a cop who had been to several mass shootings. He was on the scene for several of them. It was very interesting. He played us the Columbine school, the first big one, the tapes of the teacher in the library and how sad that was to hear, and just it made your skin crawl to hear. It was disgusting. I asked him, I said, why? What do you think it is? What's happening? Why is there so many mass shootings now? Is it just, is it the media covering it? What is it? Like it's just copycats or what is it? And he said, do you want to tell you the truth? And I'm like, yeah, what do you think? And he said, I think it's violent video games. And I was like, oh, yeah, really? You think so? He's like, yeah, from everything I've seen and studied. He said they even had a video game that they were going to put out, and he said they did not put it out, and I didn't research this, so I don't know if it's true or not, but that's what he told me. He said it was based on you would be a first-person shooter, which you don't know what that is. You have a gun in front of you as a video game, walking through, and you're shooting up people in a school. That was a game. I told someone that, and they said, oh, yeah, you can download that online. It's a Columbine simulator. It's literally Columbine. You can go through and shoot people. In Army, in Marines, and stuff like that, what they do to desensitize people today is that they play video games or get video game simulators to desensitize their mind, so when they go out in the field and they kill somebody, it's just a part of the game. I can handle it a little better. What he said is the reason he thinks it's violent video games is because these people, he says, hard because they commit suicide so many times. So we have to go back through and trace them. He said the kid in Florida that killed so many people, he said he did not kill himself. So we're able to find a lot more out about this. And he said what it is there's a trigger. It snaps. A trigger comes on. And it's almost as if they don't know what they are doing until something snaps, the trigger releases, they realize what they have done, and they kill themselves. He said the weird thing about the guy in Florida is that his trigger snapped early, he changed his clothes, and he went out with the crowd. But he says, how do you know what to do with that trigger? You've trained yourself. Things are so realistic anymore. TV, videos, things that we say, it doesn't affect us at all. It does affect us. It's not 1960 not 1950 where you can tell, well, that's pretty fake. But even then they couldn't tell it. What was the first movie ever really seen? And you know what that is? In movie screens? It was a train pulling into a station. You know what people's reaction was when they saw that movie? They ran out of the movie house. Why? Because they thought the train was going to hit them. You watch that today and you're like, what a bunch of morons. It's obviously just a video of a train. But to them, it was real. Why do we think the things we see today are not super real to us? Our brain processes things differently than we think. Let's look at Psalm 40 and 12. David says there, for evils beyond number have surrounded me. He's lamenting here. My inquiries have overtaken me so that I am not able to see. They are more numerous than the hairs on my head, and my heart has failed me. Sin leaves a tarnish on a person's mind and their soul, so they do not look at life quite the same way anymore. David expresses how the tarnish affected him. Think about your own lives, and I want you to do this little exercise. The next time you're watching something, you're binge watching or whatever, close your eyes for a second and see what you see. You will see the images you just saw. You will see the exact things you just consumed inside your brain. We'll be talking about this in a moment, but I don't want to get to it too much. But binge watching, consuming content, that's what they call this now. It is no different than what you feed yourself. The diet you feed your mind is the same as the diet you feed your body. And if you're feeding your body full of junk food, guess what? You become morbidly obese, and you will die. Sadly, there's a quarterback the other day. It was a quarterback that was pretty good. He was in Kentucky. He was a quarterback. He literally ate himself to death. He was in his 30s, and he had a heart attack because he just got fatter and fatter. I'm not saying anything bad about that man, but it's the same thing we do with our minds when we consume bad content, when we can binge watch things that are not godly or innocent. We are getting fatter and lazier and worse off in our brain. Well, I don't see it, so it doesn't matter. But you feel it, and you know you feel it. Think about it the next time you do it. And I hope you don't do it again, but we all will, sadly. And say, how can I avoid this? Because it is not good for my mental health. Innocence also saved us. The last thing on innocence here. It saved us. Let's look at Hebrews 10 and 14. Hebrews 10 and 14. For by one offering he was perfected for all time those who were sanctified. Jesus' sacrifice, his perfection, his innocence saved us all and can save others around us. What happened when Jesus died on the cross? I love this verse. Matthew 27:54. Now the centurion, we don't know anything else about the centurion, and those who were with him keeping guard over Jesus, when they saw the earthquake and the things that were happening, became frightened and said, what? Truly, this was the Son of God. When you are innocent and when you are pure, as Jesus was, people might be horrible to you on this earth, might call you gullible and naive, and you don't know how the world works. Are you stupid or something? They killed Jesus horrifically. They beat him. They slapped him. They spit on him. He was perfect. Why do we think we're above that? It's not our obligation to please people on this earth and to make them call us a hero or amazing or you're awesome. It's not that we want this in the earth. It's what we want in heaven. Jesus wasn't worried about what people said about him on earth or what they did to him on earth. He was worried about doing the will of his Father, and we should be too. Okay, turn over in the back there. It says, what are you feeding your mind? And I put that old cartoon comic strip exclamation point question mark because it's like when you come in, you're like, what are you doing? What are you eating? I love this quote from David Sarnoff. If you don't know David Sarnoff, he was the RCA guy who was one of the heads of the RCA, and he helped with the radio, and then he helped basically bring television around to everybody. He was the head of NBC eventually. Very interesting guy. But he had this quote. He says, the machine itself is neither mind nor soul nor moral sense. The television is not doing anything. It's just a television. Only man has been endowed with such godlike attributes. Every age has its destined duty. Ours is to nurture an awareness of those divine attributes and a sense of responsibility in giving them expression. We have an even more big responsibility with this stupid little phone and our computers and all of our screens. We have so much entertainment. It's not the movie's fault. It's not the phone's fault. It's not the computer's fault. It's not the TV's fault. Whose is it? Ours. It is solely ours. The reason we are not innocent in the things we watch and the things we do is because of us. So when you're blaming this stupid show, I can't stop watching it. It's horrible. I shouldn't watch it. Just turn it off. Just turn it off. We talk about cutting your hand off or whatever. If it's better to lose that hand, right, than to go around sinning. It's just the same thing with content. It's the same thing with binge watching. If a show is not good, turn it off. Started to watch a show the other day on Netflix. They're like, this looks good. Master of None. I was like, I like Aziz Ansari. Whatever. Turned it on. Sex scene right at the beginning. We're like, turn it off. Won't watch that show. You have to police yourself. I'm not saying we're perfect at it. I'm saying we're trying to get better at it. Because there's so much out there like that, guys. We have more entertainment and more things that you can watch than anybody in the history of mankind has ever had. What did David Sarnoff say? The same thing. We have a responsibility to police ourselves. The government won't do it for you, and if they did, they'd do a terrible job. We have to do it as Christians. Put good things in, you get good things out. You put bad things in, you get bad things out. It's as simple as that. A guy told me that one day when he's picking up his kid from daycare, North Daycare. And many people said it before, but for some reason stuck with what he said. Good things in, good things out. Bad things in, bad things out. Not that hard. Philippians 4 and 8. Philippians 4 and 8. Finally, brethren, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is of good repute, is there any excellence, and if anything worthy of praise, dwell on these things. He didn't say, if there's something filthy, something sinful, oh yeah, good, you just grab a piece of that, watch that. It's just my TV, though. Like I said before, if you feed yourself a consistent diet of junk food, you will be fatally ill. If we do the same thing with our mind, we feed ourselves junk, we will become fatefully ill. The same thing. Much of entertainment and literature in our society is ungodly. It's a lot. There's a lot of it. And this doesn't apply to the obvious material such as pornography. I'm not just talking about that. I'm talking about tons of shows you can watch, tons of things you can view with super ease anymore. It also applies to many regular TV shows. Social media, there are so much on that. They've tried to police it on Facebook and things like that, but there are tons of things that go unnoticed. I'm going through right now and unfollowing a bunch of people. If they have anything on there that I know is anti-Christian as far as just being terrible content, unfollow. And I'm not saying, I just disagree with you, unfollow you, whatever. I'm talking about if they're putting stuff that's sexual, if they're putting stuff that's suggestive, things like that, just unfollow them. It's not that hard. Movies, books, magazines, music. Listen to the songs on the radio. Listen to the lyrics on any pop station. You're like, watch Disney Channel for like 30 minutes and just your jaw will drop. We have it on at work, and I'm like, you walk by and there's no sound. I'm like, what channel is this? Like guys walking around shirtless, like girls oiling them up, like teenage girls, and I'm like, that's the Disney Channel? That's the Disney Channel. That's where we're at, folks. You know, Hollywood's interesting because they do things. I'll jump to one thing because I think it's interesting. Where did the diamond ring come from? You know, when Shannon and I got engaged, I have to get her diamond ring. And I was talking to my cousin Randall, and he's like, you know, that's all kind of stupid, right? And he got a diamond ring. I'm like, what are you talking about? You know, not a romantic. You know, go get a diamond ring. And he's like, he got his wife a little diamond ring, he said, but that's besides the point. But he said, you know, the whole thing happened years ago in the early 1900s. He said what happened was that there was an overinflation of diamonds. The whole thing is just one big marketing scam. I looked it up, it's true. De Beers Consolidated Mines Ltd. It's their genius marketing plan. They had tons of diamonds. Diamonds were worthless during the Depression. No one's buying these things. We have tons of them. What are we going to do? Well, you know what? There's this new thing called Hollywood, movies and things like that people are kind of paying attention to. So what they did is this genius thing. They actually sunk a boat filled with diamonds. So that drove the price of diamonds up. And then they had Hollywood actors and actresses, whenever they got engaged on film or in real life, they would get down on one knee, they would offer a diamond ring, and the girl would emphatically say yes, and then hint at sexual favors. I'm not making this up, folks. This is how the tradition of the diamond ring on your finger came to be about. Oh, you just killed romance, Nathan. Now, it's kind of sad, isn't it? We think about these things that go back so far, and we think, oh, that's been years. That's always been a tradition. You do not think about the things that TV has made us think has been around forever. I'll give you one right here. Oh, everybody's anti-racism now, of course. Shouldn't be a racist. Of course you shouldn't be a racist. That's not, why is that even an argument? Like, that's the dumbest thing ever. But they still ask you what color you are on your job application, which I never put. What a bunch of morons. Racism is in form of job exclusion and racially stereotyped roles has defined Hollywood film industry since its birth in the 1900s. And about in the 70s, they realized, okay, if we get away from racism, maybe we can make some more money. They've changed their shtick, but they stereotyped things forever. What about blackface? How horrible that was, you know, and they were doing all these things. Indians, or what was it, Jim Thorpe. We were talking about that the other day. Dad went to Jim Thorpe, PA, and Jim Thorpe he was a Native American, this great athlete, and they made a movie about him. And they took a white guy, and they put him in Indian makeup. Like, just stupid stuff like this, folks. Racism was alive, and Hollywood continued to help it. It's the same thing they did with Christians. Why do people look at Christians as backwoods, redneck, hillbillies, closed-minded, moronic people? They're hypocrites. It's because Hollywood perpetuates a stereotype of Christians. It started with this movie, Inherit the Wind. It might have been before this, but this is the one they can really pinpoint. This is about the Scopes trial. They depicted the people in Tennessee there as moronic hillbillies. And then from that, you have a bunch of stereotypes. You have things, and I'm sure you can remember some more of these, but if you have a preacher in a movie or a TV show, the sermon is always boring. Always boring. Everybody's like, oh. The other thing about it is, if they go off the cuff, I'm putting the Bible away and I'm just going to speak to my congregation. It's usually 3 minutes or less, and everybody's like, that's the best sermon I've ever heard. When the preacher throws out a prepared sermon, he speaks, and it lasts 3 minutes, and they're always like, ooh, it's amazing. If the preacher preaches against sin, he's almost immediately caught in that sin. Oh, my goodness. How dare you preach against sin, and you're obviously sinning that exact same thing. We all sin. Church regulars, people like you and I, are always portrayed as self-righteous prudes. Are we? Oh, you know, that old lady, she's always, you kids. If the preacher's kids are rebels, the preacher is always wrong and the kids are always right. This also goes for cops' kids, doctors' kids, teachers' kids, superheroes' kids, yada, yada, yada. Preachers are usually judgmental jerks or naive simpletons who don't know much. Christians love to argue, fight, and attack. Christians' online faith does not reflect reality. Oh, I shared a verse, but I'm not a Christian in real life. I'm just going to share some Bible verses. These are stereotypes that are being perpetuated through social media, through TV. You have to be careful what you consume. Like I said, it's not just pornography or something that graphic or something. I'm talking about just day-to-day sitcoms, things you think are so innocent and fun, day-to-day songs you listen to, and you're like, my goodness, what is this? A good guideline is to only engage in activities Jesus would approve of. As John wrote, the one who says he abides in him ought himself to walk in the same manner as he walked. We need to be like Jesus. So here's a simple test. Would Jesus enjoy what I enjoy? Would Jesus find the same jokes I find funny? Would Jesus read or watch the same things as I'm watching? Would Jesus listen to the same music I'm listening to? Would Jesus do the same things I do? What changes do you think God would like you to make in what you do or watch for entertainment? What changes do you think would like you to make and how much time you spend on entertainment? That's the thing. We don't have to spend all this time watching this stuff, folks. There are so many wonderful things out there to do. I love seeing Caleb and Amber's pictures of them going out in like the wilderness and getting lost and eating mushrooms or whatever they do out there. I don't know. But just doing whatever out there. Just being outside. We've lost this sense. You just go around and look how many people are on their phone. There was a thing I was reading and I was looking at this, Mr. Rogers. They said he was the only guy that could walk into a subway and get the whole subway car singing. He literally walked into the subway because he was running late. He walked into the subway car and everybody started saying, "Won't you be my neighbor?" to him because they didn't think he'd recognize him, but they did. That's an infectious person. Are we so pure? Are we so innocent that it's an infectious thing? Or are we letting the things we consume in our lives turn us into something different? In an entertainment-mad world, don't spend so much time on entertainment. When we spend too much time on entertainment, we often neglect our family and friends, and our relationships suffer. How many husbands and wives, Shannon and I catch ourselves doing this sometimes, we got to go, I'll put the phone away. Or like sitting at the end of the night, just kind of scrolling for hours. Oh, did you see this? Did you see this? Mm-hmm. Oh, I just shared it with you. Oh, you didn't like that? Oh, that was funny. That's our lives now. Consuming. Plus, we are not fulfilling God's purpose for us. He wants us to develop our gift and to reach out and to minister to others. We are called to make a difference in this world, not merely be spectators. Look at the last verse here, Ephesians 2:10. For we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared beforehand so that we would walk in them. I'm sorry if this lesson wasn't perfect. Like I said, I did spell innocence wrong at the top, but I am not a perfect person, and you are not a perfect person either. But we can be more innocent. We can spend more time away from entertainment. And of anybody in here, I will tell you, I think I will put myself against anybody. I love entertainment. I love it. I love making videos. I love social media. My job is social media. Literally, that's all I do is social media. And I'm telling you to avoid it, to watch what you watch, to pay attention to the things you consume, because it is so vastly dangerous to us all. Oh, you're over-exaggerating. I don't think I'm exaggerating enough. It is one of the greatest burdens of our generation, and it is something we do not talk about. Help each other out. Put good stuff out there. Be a good person, and be more innocent. So how can you stop killing innocence in your own life? Only you can answer that. Every one of us has a different cross to bear. We have a different sin we have to get over. We have to work at it. How can more innocence improve your Christianity? If you're a Christian, you should be innocent. That's it. Jesus was innocent. In the conclusion of all things, if you're here today and you want to start over and you've never been baptized, you need to hear that Jesus is the Son of God. Believe that he is the Son of God. Repent, confess, and be baptized. And for most of us in here that are Christians, we need to live faithfully unto death. And sometimes we mess up. A lot of times. Every day we mess up. We've got to continuously ask for forgiveness and prayer. We've got to continuously ask each other to help ourselves out with the struggling things we're struggling with. Do not be afraid to go to a brother or sister in Christ and ask for help, to pray for you, for not just your physical symptoms, the things you're dealing with mentally, the things you're dealing with inside your soul, and the struggles you're having. There's no shame in that. There's no shame in that. Hopefully we can all do it better. I know it was kind of a strange and long lesson, but it's something that's been on my heart for a while, and hopefully we all got something out of it. So if nothing else, you need to ask for help and prayers. You can do so now, or if you've never been baptized, please do not delay any longer as we sing the song that's been sung.